Christmas Eve, we are part of a miracle. Every girl and boy shares the joy if they believe. You can share it too, just believe in the...
Santa Claus the movie begins hundreds of years ago, and an old woman is telling the story of the Vendigums, who are the little people that live at the North Pole. The villagers are anxiously awaiting because every year on Christmas, a local woodcarver named Claus arrives by sleigh delivering gifts.
All right, everybody back.
Oh dear God, I'm so glad we made it. We've been snowed in on the northern pass for weeks. We had to eat 6 of our reindeer and just like a whole family of Arctic puffins. Oh, the horrors I've seen and caused. Why must I suffer this cruel world? Claus has more toys to deliver, but the weather is getting worse.
You can't see your hand in front of your face out there. You won't get through.
My reindeer, Donner and Blitzen can get through anything.
Why, they got through me driving a pickaxe into the brain pans of their brothers and watching Mrs. Claus bathe in their blood, dancing around naked as the day she was born. Reindeer are very resilient. So Claus and his wife Anya brave the storm again, but the weather gets too bad and Claus gets lost, and his 2 remaining reindeer succumb to the freezing temperatures. And now I know what you're saying. Oh, well they can just cut open the reindeer and cocoon themselves inside their lifeless bodies to stay warm like Luke Skywalker did. Well, I hate to be the one to break it to you, but that would never work. Since the animals are dead, they would provide no more body heat, and would in fact begin to freeze almost immediately. So now there's still an hour and 40 minutes left, so I can only assume that the rest of the movie is just a search party attempting to bring back Claus's remains. But just then, the sleigh gets surrounded by little people known as the Vendigum. And don't worry, children, this is just the last few synapses firing in Santa's brain before he dies. He is in no pain, and it's said that the experience is sometimes euphoric. So Santa Claus is drifting off to sleep, just absolutely hard as a rock. So don't you cry for him. He's at peace.
Vendigum.
We prefer to be called elves, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that the movie even came up with the term Vendigum. Could have just called them elves right off the bat. Claus is greeted by the elder elf Dooley, and he meets Patch, played by Dudley Moore.
We were expecting someone nice, but not someone so young and pretty and young, were we, boys? Oh, don't be elf-conscious. Yeah, I tell you, boys, he gives me a real feeling of elf confidence.
You just know Patch realized that elf and self rhymes, and he probably has 100 of these sayings. They show the Clauses the workshop, and tells them that Claus will deliver the toys to all the children of the world, and that him and Mrs. Claus are now immortal.
Anya?
Oh my God, what is going on? I guess immortality and an army of sex slaves really gets Mrs. Claus's engine cranked. And so with the missus properly satisfied, Santa goes to explore his new dominion and finds Patch trying to console Donner, who appears to have the shakes, most likely caused by a brain parasite. It is a real problem around here. And when the reindeer finally die from being eaten alive from the inside, you can't even harvest any of their delicious meat. It's just an awful situation for everyone involved. Patch lives in the stable so he can look after the reindeer. You've heard of Elf on the Shelf? Now get ready for Patch laying in thatch. I can see the memes now.
Well, he'll be all right, sir, just as soon as he gets used to the place. He just needs a little elf control.
Nice, Patch. Nice. The next day, the elves get to work building wooden rocking horses, and only wooden rocking horses. And as they're working, the dome at the top of the workshop opens, and Gazer? I don't know his name, but it seems to fit. So Gazer is tracking the North Star.
2 more degrees north by northwest. Now!
Gazer, we can all see it without a telescope. I'm sorry you spent all your elf money on that thing, but it's just not necessary in this situation. I keep trying to tell you. We finally get to the first Christmas Eve, and Mrs. Claus is feeling pretty randy. Dooley, you do not want to interrupt the missus when she's trying to get her rocks off. Because if Santa can't satisfy her sexually before he leaves, that means you're going to have to fill in, buddy. And you know how aggressive the missus gets.
Oh, I'm so proud of you.
For what? He hasn't done anything. And you don't even know if this is some kind of elaborate prank yet or not. So Santa takes off for the first time to deliver toys to all the children of the world. And we get a montage of the centuries passing. And no matter what century it is, every child gets wooden toy soldiers. And in the 18th century, we see a girl watching her brother abuse their cat. And now for all you animal lovers out there, don't worry, every animal was harmed in the making of this production. The girl writes a letter to Santa telling him about her brother, and Mrs. Claus says that the boy shouldn't get any presents.
You'll have folks saying that Santa Claus only rewards the good little boys and girls.
Isn't that as it should be?
Dooley, make up a list of who is naughty and nice.
Yes, sir.
And be careful. I'll be checking it twice.
You know, this makes the origin of that line seem like a threat to the elves and not a warning to children. And why is Santa wearing a yellow muumuu? Also, it took you 400 years to learn that shitty kids shouldn't get presents. My first year, I'd be like, that kid's a ridiculous piece of shit. I'm not giving him anything. And so also, if you're good, Santa will bring you an abacus. The incentive program is a mess. And wait, was Santa wearing Mrs. Claus's clothes earlier? Does she force him to because then it seems like she's getting railed by herself? Mrs. Claus is a stone cold freak. And we reach the 20th century, and after 600 years of the same old shit, Santa's starting to lose it. Dude's taking uppers to get him through the night, and then he's crashing hard the next day. So Mrs. Claus and Goober? I forget this dude's name. Anyways, they suggest that Santa hire an assistant, and Patch and Puffy both compete for the job. So the winner gets to be Santa's assistant and gets 10 minutes alone with Mrs. Claus, whether they want it or not. And Puffy wants to do things the old-fashioned way, and Patch wants to create an automated toy-making machine that will essentially put them all out of business. But like most innovations, this one malfunctions and kills a lot of people. But Santa realizes that progress has always resulted in death, and that it's a necessary evil, so he decrees that Patch is his new assistant. And back on Earth, seriously, what the hell's wrong with me? So still on Earth, we meet a young girl named Cornelia.
Sitting around half done. If you think that your step-uncle is going to stand for this kind of
He never even looks at my report card.
Now, I've heard of an evil stepmother and an evil stepsister, but I think this is the first evil step-uncle we've ever had. How does that even work? What are the circumstances that have to happen to cause you to end up living with your dead aunt's second husband? We then meet a street urchin named Joe, who first enters a McDonald's commercial. And then wanders into a Coke commercial when Cornelia leaves him food.
Hey, boy.
It's like a Christmas version of Mac and Me. Uh-oh. I think Mrs. Claus is in there conducting her annual elf reviews. Go back to your room, you horny old goat. And so Patch's machine doesn't work and it shits out defective toys. And another Christmas is upon us and Santa is just passing so many houses. He should be stopping at every building, going from apartment to apartment. I want this movie to be 1,100 hours long. Santa sees Joe and makes an unscheduled stop.
What are you doing out here?
I'm pitching a no-hitter for the Yankees. What's it look like?
Don't you know who I am? I'm Santa Claus.
Santa Claus ain't real.
Man, that is some authentic grade school theater production delivery there. So Santa abducts a homeless child off the street and tries to impress him by attempting the super duper looper trick with the reindeer. A maneuver that the reindeer have never been able to pull off.
Well, maybe tonight's the night. Come on, Donner. Let's give it an old college try.
Oh my god, Santa, you were headed right for the Twin Towers. Holy shit. Pull up, you maniac! Donner chickens out at the last minute and decides he doesn't want to cause a 9/11 style attack. I guess this one would have been called 12/24, which is not as catchy. I mean, I'm not saying 9/11 is catchy. It was a tragedy. There's nothing catchy or marketable about it. Let's move on. And so the next day, children all across the world wake up to play with their wooden toys, which all immediately break. And they all begin returning their broken toys to the North Pole, and Patch resigns and takes off. And an hour into this movie, we are finally introduced to the evil toy maker BZ, played by the always reliable John Lithgow. And BZ is under investigation for selling dangerous toys.
Senator, I'm even more astonished than you are to see this, and I can guarantee that if these are not isolated examples, I'll make sure that they never happen again.
I love how everyone else is pretty much playing this movie completely straight, and classically trained thespian John Lithgow is just hamming it up and having the time of his life. And the next day at BZ Toys, BZ is visited by Patch.
Listen, Brucey! Oh, don't bother with that. If anybody comes in, I'll just vanish.
You what?
Vanish! Hi!
You've heard of Elf on the Shelf? Now get ready for Dudley Moore in a drawer. He's actually still on a shelf. Anywho.
How are you?
Well, isn't it self-explanatory?
You know, Patch, you're gonna run out of those elfisms one of these days, and then your life is gonna be just as meaningless as everyone else's. And Patch wants to take over the toy factory, but he needs to get the word out about his toys, and wants to advertise on TV in every country.
That would cost a fortune.
If you give extra kisses, you get bigger hugs. What Santa's wife's always saying.
Oh my god. Coming from Mrs. Claus, that becomes way more sinister. Patch wants to give the toys away for free, and BZ thinks that might actually help clean up his image.
This product of yours, what exactly is it?
I don't know, BZ, but I can guarantee that it's made entirely of wood with 0 moving parts. That's the shitty movie Christmas present guarantee.
It's got a secret ingredient.
Angel dust? And so BZ plans to distribute whatever Patch makes for free this Christmas, and then charge people hundreds of dollars next Christmas when they want more. And so Patch whores himself out on live TV to advertise his creation.
A little fused candy.
What? The hell is that? I thought he was making a toy. That's what people are going to spend hundreds of dollars on? Also, Patch is a toy maker. Why is he making candy? So Christmas morning arrives, and everyone starts to eat the little puce candy, which makes people float. And BZ wants Patch to up the formula and give people the ability to fly instead of float, and says that they'll release them on March 25th, which he wants to be known as Christmas 2. And Patch then sets out making candy canes to give the gift of flight, and Santa's ready to call it quits. You can tell Mrs. Claus is not about to give up her elf harem.
Maybe this fella BZ is smarter than I am. Maybe I'm just an old fool.
And, okay, Santa, you've hit a bit of a rough patch, but you've been doing this for centuries. You just need one big idea that'll blow the children's minds.
It's a new doll.
You crafty son of a bitch. You did it. You saved Christmas. Joe goes to visit Cornelia, and she tells him to stay in her house. And in a surprise twist, we learn that BZ is Cornelia's evil step-uncle. And he gets a late-night visit from his accountant, Towser. And in one of the best visual gags in a movie ever, the uber-rich BZ drinks PBR out of a brandy snifter. Classy as shit.
Santa Claus is finished!
I mean, I don't know how this would mark the end of Santa Claus. Hot new toys come around all the time. Santa can make it through new toy fads. Of course, that is until the Tickle Me Elmo craze happens and Santa finally puts a bullet in his head. Oh, I'm sorry, that got dark. And then Santa dies of an elf-inflicted gunshot wound. There, that's better. BZ catches Joe eavesdropping and takes him hostage, and Towser tells BZ that if the candy canes come in contact with heat, then they'll explode. But BZ doesn't want to stop production, and plans to get as much money as he can and let Patch take the blame. And Cornelia, after apparently waiting until the next day after she's eaten, changed, and watched some TV, then urgently sends a letter to Santa Claus asking to help Joe, who's been tied up in the factory all night. Call the police, Cornelia. What's this dude gonna do? I don't even think Santa's ever been in a fight. Patch finds Joe tied up, and they decide to head to the North Pole to see Santa. But in a gift of the Magi-style circumstance, Santa came back to Earth. And Santa goes to Cornelia's house, and they rush off to find Joe. So Patch and Joe then load up the sleigh with the candy canes and take off, with Santa and Cornelia in hot pursuit. And to an outside observer, this just looks like Patch and Joe are on a kamikaze run on Santa's workshop.
Can't they go any faster?
They usually get a year's rest. They're doing their best.
Yeah, Cornelia, you inconsiderate piece of shit. The candy canes begin to overheat, and Santa needs to catch up with them now.
The super-duper looper.
Santa, a big part of this maneuver is going the exact opposite way that you're currently traveling. Not sure how that's supposed to help you catch up to Patch. So Santa begins the maneuver and immediately flies past Joe and Patch. And Santa, if the reindeer can already catch up to them, then the super-duper looper is entirely unnecessary. Santa, he's just showing off. So Patch's sleigh explodes, and Santa catches him and Joe, and Christmas is saved. Well, Christmas 2 is saved. And back on Earth, the police raid BZ's house, and he eats a handful of candy canes and floats up to outer space. And you know what? Not enough Christmas movies end with an evil billionaire's lifeless body orbiting the Earth for all eternity. Like, I can only think of 3.